most trustless name in news.
Bitcoin crashes. Bitcoin bounces back over critical support. What the freak is happening? Many people will tell you it's this. Many people will tell you it's that. But not many people will go as deep as me, looking into what the freak is going on. So are you ready to dive deep into Bitcoin, ETFs, GBTC outflows, and even FTX? Well, let's swim because it's time for Chico Crypto. There is no denying the Bitcoin price has been a volatile son of a biznut since the beginning of the year. January 1st, there was an 8% pump. January 2nd, an 8% dump. January 3rd, an 8.2% pump. January 8th, a 5.3% dump. January 9th, an 8.5% pump, a 5.3% dump January 9th, an 8.5% pump January 10th to the 11th, followed by a 12% dump January 11th to the 12th. And finally, lately, on January 19th, a 5.4% dump, followed by a 7.2% crash January 22nd through the 23rd. And as of yesterday, the 24th, we had a 4.6% pump, putting us back over 40K support. We all know early on in January, this volatility was due to the anticipation of the Bitcoin ETF. It's getting passed, pump. It's getting rejected, dump. But finally, the ETFs got approved. And since the approvals, this volatility has been 90% down and down to the ground. So why? Well, like I said in the intro, people are all saying different things and reasons for the dump. Like popular Twitter profile Whale Wire, who said yesterday, nearly all Bitcoin ETFs are now facing rapidly growing net outflows. It's no longer just Grayscale dumping their bags on retail. Investors are slowly starting to realize what we warned from day one, that institutional demand is non-existent and is a fake narrative invented by maxis to create false hopium to manipulate prices higher. We've barely dropped at all yet, so don't forget to take profits. What Whale Wire is saying is this dump was caused because all the Bitcoin ETFs are facing net outflows and they are rapidly growing. Outflows are people selling their Bitcoin, causing the number of Bitcoin held in the ETF fund to decrease. So is there any truth to this? Well, many people are putting most of the Bitcoin dump blame on one ETF. That is Grayscale's GBTC. Like Cointelegraph having an article titled, "Guessing Game on When GBTC Bleeding Stops Helps Push Bitcoin Below 39K." So is there any truth to this? Has GBTC been having mass outflows that have been putting mass selling pressure on the Bitcoin price, causing these recent volatile price crashes? Well, yeah, there is actually. We have the latest data on Grayscale's Bitcoin ETF outflows, and the numbers look like this. On the first day of Bitcoin ETF trading, Grayscale's GBTC had 617,029 Bitcoin inside the ETF. By the next day, this number decreased to 605,891 Bitcoin, aka 11,188 BTC were sold. aka over $525 million worth of Bitcoin were sold January 11th to the 12th. From the 12th to the 16th, Grayscale went from 615,891 BTC to 592,098 BTC. 13,793 BTC were sold for likely over $579 million. From the 16th to the 17th, the ETF fund went from 592,098 BTC to 581,274 BTC. 10,824 Bitcoin were sold for over $454 million. From the 17th to the 18th, 14,301 BTC were sold for over $586 million. From the 18th to the 19th, 14,292 Bitcoin were sold for over $585 million. From the 19th to the 22nd, 15,986 Bitcoin were sold for over $647 million. And then finally, from the 22nd to the 23rd, 13,130 BTC were sold for over $512 million. Based on these numbers, since the ETF launched, Grayscale ETF investors have sold off over 93,000 Bitcoin, worth over $3.8 billion, based on the number of BT outflows daily and the Bitcoin price at the time of the outflow. Pretty freaking gnarly. Over $3.8 billion worth of selling pressure is a lot. But there were other ETFs from the likes of Blackrock, Fidelity, and more. Were they having net outflows too? AKA people selling their Bitcoin? Well, after the first days of trading, no. Blackrock went from 2,621 BTC January 11th to 11,439 January 12th. Fidelity went from 5,268 to 9,750. Bitwise slightly increased, ARK basically doubled their stack, Invesco went from 110 to 1,151, VanEck went up slightly, Valkyrie doubled their BTC stack, Franklin was stable, Wisdom slightly increased. The only ETF with outflows from the first day of trading to the second day was Grayscale. And for the other ETFs besides Grayscale, this inflow of Bitcoin has continued day after day after day. None of the other ETFs have had outflows. There has been strong accumulation by their ETF investors, pretty much across the board. Actually, when you look at the numbers, without Grayscale, the other ETFs started their first day of trading with 18,390 BTC. By January 23rd, the last day of data I could get, I shoot my videos one day in advance, they had accumulated, all the other ETFs, 119,020 BTC. That means total inflows were 100,630 BTC. Remember, Grayscale sold off just over 93,000 Bitcoin. So actually, there has been net inflows of BTC since the ETFs launched. Whalewire is lying through their teeth. There has been buying, only outflows from GBTC, not the other ETFs, who have been accumulating and accumulating hard. Now, what we need to understand is the trading of Bitcoin has become a very, very complex beast. You can't just look at the inflows and the outflows of all the ETFs and come to the conclusion that, hey, there were more inflows than outflows. Total. Thus, the price should have never dumped, it should have pumped. Well, maybe these inflows came when the price hit its bottom, and that is the reason for the supports being found and the price not crashing any further. It's just with the Grayscale GBTC now converted to an ETF, Bitcoin is seeing a shat ton of more selling pressure overall than it has in the past. Historically, GBTC has been a significant holder of Bitcoin. This accumulation was primarily due to their practice of redeeming shares by paying investors in USD rather than selling off the underlying Bitcoin. This approach changed following the approval of their ETF. Investors are now in charge of their Bitcoin that they hodl with the ETF. When they sell, they are selling Bitcoin, not just shares and getting USD. So who has been the culprit? Who has been selling their Bitcoin from Grayscale's Bitcoin ETF? Well, like a fly on the wall that will never go away, guess who is back? Taking down the crypto markets with them, FTX. CoinDesk posted this article earlier in the week. FTX sold about $1 billion of Grayscale's Bitcoin ETF. explaining much of the outflow sources. And the article stated, a large chunk of that exodus was FTX's bankruptcy estate dumping 22 million shares, according to private data CoinDesk reviewed and 2 people familiar with the matter. The 22 million shares it sold, which took FTX's GBTC ownership down to 0, were worth close to $1 billion. FTX is back, putting big sell pressure on the markets. They need cash to pay back their investors, and they took the opportunity to get this cash quick. Although they sold just about $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. Remember, there was about $3.8 billion worth of Bitcoin sold from Grayscale's ETF fund. Why have other investors sold off another $2.8 billion worth of Bitcoin? Well, if you didn't know, Grayscale and their ETF charges a 1.5% annual management fee, significantly higher than that of what other ETF issuers charge. This fee disparity has made the other ETFs more attractive to the Grayscale investors. In my personal opinion, a lot of the selling going down wasn't just investors escaping Bitcoin. They were selling high from the Grayscale ETF and then rebuying low into the other ETFs whose fees are much lower. That is why Bitcoin has been dumping but finding support. There are massive sells, but they are countered days later or even a day later when these investors rebuy into other ETFs like from Blackrock or Fidelity. Like I mentioned in my video a few days ago, I expected the markets to rebound a bit, but this dump isn't over. Bitcoin needed a cool off, and this cool off is a very, very good sign. We aren't into the bull mania territory yet, and crashes like this have happened in past cycles. So having one now actually makes me very happy. Well, viewers, what are your thoughts on the markets? Do you think we are going to keep on crashing, or has the sell-off stopped and the only way is up from now on out? Let me know down in the comments, and of course subscribe if you haven't. Make sure to set those notifications so you don't miss any of my content, and of course, like this vid. And I also want to let the Chico Army know I'm engaged to the love of my life, the Chico Crypto Camera Woman. I love you, babe. Cheers, viewers. I'll see you next time.
The most trustless name in news.